All right, Alan. How we doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. So, when you give us the 200 words on who you are and what you do?
So my name's Alan McDougall. I'm the Director of Educational Technology at the University of New Haven. I've been in IT for about 25 years, and I do triathlon and running, so mostly Ironman.
How many full Ironmans have you done?
I'm on 18. I'm trying to get to 20.
That's great. I mean, that's a commitment.
It is. I always say that anybody can do it. And I mean, obviously, within limits, but, I'm a pretty average human being.
Yeah, and that was always the thing. I never doubted that I could complete an Ironman. It was just looking at the training schedule going, I don't know where I'm going to find the time to put myself in a position to respect it, right?
Well, fortunately, I just have one kid, and my wife's also an Ironman athlete. When you're with somebody else who understands the commitment and the training, and you take, sometimes we take turns. One person will do a race one year and the other person won't, or we'll do the same race. We've tried different flavors to figure out, what still works within a family. And we just came back from Disney for a week. So, we also realized that everything can't be about the sport.
Yeah. Just with the bike, you got to put some hours in, right? There's no way around the hours. And it's a time commitment, whether you're spinning or out on the road, it's just a time commitment.
Fortunately I get up at 5 a.m. So
you get up and do your spin in the morning.
Yeah. In the dark, in the cold, but I'm in the basement.
Yeah. That's how it works, right? That's how you're successful. It's get up early, get it done. Then you're a zombie at night, unless you're one of those blessed people who only need 4 hours of sleep a night.
That's me.
That's you? All right.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I try to get to bed. 12:05 is my drop dead stop time at night. And then, 5:10 in the morning is my up time.
Yeah. And so you made a choice of either ruling the world or doing Ironman with that extra 8 hours that you get over the rest of us. Okay. Good choice. So you and I were talking on Twitter. People still use Twitter, and you were telling me you had a great story about running. So you want to give us all the gory details? Take your time, tell us a story. Imagine you're in an Irish pub, right? Everybody's had a couple, and you say, "Wait! I got a story for you."
So it was a cold February day,
a dark and stormy night.
That's right, except it was daytime, fortunately. And my boss had actually just had kind of a heart issue, so he was out. So, I'm really diligent about my job, but I also needed to start getting in some longer runs because I was training for a marathon. So I blocked out about 75 minutes for my run at lunch. I'd get an hour. I was going to squeeze it a little bit because I'd gotten in early. And I go out and I start running, and the campus is sort of adjacent to New Haven. So if you run for any distance, it's a mix of city streets, suburban. And I got on more of a city street layout, and I went to go through an intersection, and a woman who was making a right on red didn't stop as I was, coming across, basically forced me up on the sidewalk. And as I think about it now, I put my foot out to protect myself, but certainly what it looked like is that I just did a side kick into the one of the door panels on the car, right? So, and I did damage the door. It had to be replaced. So I guess I kicked it pretty hard. But now that I'm a Taekwondo black belt, I can say it's, my skills as an athlete. But at the time, Taekwondo wasn't even a thought in my head. So I just kept running. I was like, this is one of these things that happens. And she turned her car around and started to chase me. And it's kind of an interesting chase because you're on one side of the road and the car's on the other side of the road. And I'm running, 6-minute miles. So she's driving 10 miles an hour. And I can hear her on whatever type of cell phones they had 20 years ago. She called 911. And the first time they hung up on her, and then she got somebody again. And I kind of crossed over from like one town to the other from West Haven into New Haven. And I'm running along and like traffic is backing up behind her. There's school buses because half day kindergarten's getting out. And I'm like, this is going to turn into one of those really dangerous traffic situations. So I figured I could lose her by cutting across somebody's yard. So I cut through some yards and I got to a chain link fence and I jumped the fence. And where do I end up? I end up on Yale University's athletic fields. So I'm running down across the soccer field, and I actually had played soccer there, so I was familiar with where I was. I see this big cloud of dust. New Haven police car comes down this dirt path, and I stopped. I mean, what do you do when you see the cops? You stop, right? And I was almost to a swamp. If I'd gotten into the swamp, I would have basically gotten away, right? So I stopped, and I try to engage the officer. Well, he was not interested. He didn't want to hear anything I had to say, put me in cuffs and put me in the back of the car.
Did he make you get face down in the dirt?
No, actually, I put my hands behind my back, and he said, because you're being cooperative, we'll cuff you in the front, right? Which is, small comfort. But when you're actually seated in that plastic police bench, which is that back seat, being cuffed in the front, you're at least able to maintain your seated. You're not sliding all over the back of the car. So they pulled me up to where the other cars were, and they interviewed the woman. And based on what she told them, they ticketed her for failure to yield right away, even though I wasn't allowed to say anything at all. And I will say she was a professionally dressed woman driving a car, and I look like a scrub in my running clothes. It's the middle of the winter. You've got tights on and, a jacket. So I get it that they didn't even want to engage with me about like what the course of events was. So I thought they're going to take me down to the police station in the police car. And I was wrong. Instead, they roll up the paddy wagon, which is like a literal thing. It's like a white van. And they throw me in the back of the van. And for the next hour and a half, I'm tooling around in New Haven as they pick other people up, right? They're picking people up on warrants and things like that. I watched these two people get into the back of the van. The guy's got drugs on him that they didn't find. So he's trying to shove it into like a crevice somewhere. So as I get out of the van, finally, like an hour and a half later or whatever it was, I said to the cop who opened the door, I said, hey, they deposited some drugs in the back of your van. Not exactly sure why I'm helping out at this point, but, so you get thrown into basically what you would call the drunk tank, right? It's where they put all the holding cell. The holding cell has a toilet with no lid and like 18 people in it. So I just
what time of day is it now?
So this is like middle of the afternoon, right?
Yeah.
So I just stood there. I didn't say anything. My understanding from, people I know is the less you say, the better off you are. But I mean, it really kind of reinforced everything that I thought about some of the things that are wrong with the way the system works. At one point, somebody used the toilet. Another person asked the guard that was behind the window to flush the toilet. The basic response was, shut up, criminals. Like, we can't get a toilet flushed here. I mean, it was just, you don't really get a phone call either. There's this myth that you see on TV. People get arrested, they get a phone call, you talk to a lawyer, all this stuff. The bail bondsman comes and asks you for contact information. And then maybe they make a phone call to that person. I gave him my wife's contact info. I then just stood there. About 5:30, 6 o'clock, they passed out bologna sandwiches. I don't eat meat, so I handed it to the guy next to me. I'm like, here, have this. And the bottom line is at like 8:30 at night, they clean the holding cell out and they take anybody who's there to count them. So I happen to know a state trooper who's a friend of mine. And, where the story gets good is this is my wife's birthday, right? So we have reservations for a really fancy French restaurant in New Haven, Union League Cafe. We're really excited about going there. I don't come home. She goes to the university and one of the security guards opens my door and my clothes are just on the chair. Like That's what I do with my clothes, is I just leave them on the chair so they don't get all more wrinkled than they already are. And he says to her, oh, maybe he's having an affair. Okay. This is her birthday, right? So, I mean, totally useless. But So what she did was she called our friend who's a state trooper, and she said, hey, can you make some calls and find out if he's surfaced anywhere? And of course, I was at One Police Plaza in New Haven. When he found that out, he said, hey, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that he gets bailed out. I was about half an hour away from being scooped up out of there and sent to the county jail. No phone call. Nobody would have known where I was. Now, I'm lucky. I'm a working professional. I've got a friend that's in law enforcement that's looking out for me. If I'm, say, a single dad working a job and I get picked up in that same situation, my kid's at daycare, I don't show up to pick him up. I have it's like, I can see where this really could be a game-changing moment in a really bad way for a person.
Yeah, change somebody's life.
Yeah, it could change somebody's life, and not in a good way. So for me, like I said, I hate to say it, but it reinforced some of the things that I'd already come to understand about the way the criminal justice system works. And, ironically, I work at a university where criminal justice is one of our strongest majors.
So if your wife hadn't found you, how long would you have been in the system before you popped up?
Could have been a couple of days,
And nobody would have known where you were. Nobody
would have known where I was. Yep. Think about that.
Soonly you were arrested for something more serious than a ticketing offense.
Yeah. So, what they eventually did was they decided that I trespassed, which Yale University dropped that. And then there was misdemeanor damage to property. And the way that works is I had to pay $250 of restitution. And after 13 years, if you have no other marks on your criminal record, they nollie it. So I can say I have no criminal record because if you look at it, there's nothing on it. And I was really honest about it. Like the day my boss came back, I immediately went to him and said, hey, you need to know that I was recently arrested. This is what I was charged with. This is what the result of it was. Because I think that you've got to be honest with an employer about that when something like that happens. But I think about the way that I handled it. And basically what I should have just said was I was trying to avoid the car and I had my leg out to protect myself. Yeah. Because ironically, something like this happened to me again.
No, I've been up on the hood of people's cars in that exact same situation.
I was running in a snowstorm in Brantford, where I live, which is a couple towns over from New Haven. I was on a road. Van comes towards me. I had to jump up on a snowbank because they didn't move around me, even though there was no other traffic. They just stuck to their line. I jumped up on a snowbank and I had to put my hand out on the van to steady myself. And I didn't hit it because I've had this other experience, right? Just put my hand out, tapped it a couple of times because I didn't want to fall in under the wheel of the van. 15 minutes later, as I'm running, cop car in the middle of a snowstorm tools up to me. Did you hit a white van? I'm like, no, I was on a snowbank, literally just trying. And to think that like your thought process is somebody touched my vehicle in these situations and I'm going to send a policeman out in the snow to chase down a runner who I didn't make any kind of an accommodation for. I was just like, I can't even believe the person did that.
Yeah, you would think they'd be apologizing to you for almost killing you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, and certainly COVID has made this worse. People are just so tense. You're in your own thing too. And the first thing I do is I try to look at the situation and say, all right, well, I'm out there running. I'm a little bit amped up. I've got the adrenaline going. Did I do something wrong? And because I think you have to, if you're not asking that question, you're always going to be angry at other people for this.
Well, that's the theory of accountability, right? That's the theory of extreme ownership, right? You always ask, what could I do to make it better, right?
But when you look at it and you say, all right, there's nothing I could have done differently here. If you run, if you bike, people are going to be yelling at you out there, and
trying to kill you.
And trying to kill you. And the thicker your skin is, because, we've seen some really tragic, especially with cycling. We've seen some tragic situations where people have basically intentionally hit cyclists. Yeah. And it's such a high speed collision, and I had a 65 mile an hour collision with a car once. So I I know how that works. You know, I had a head-on collision with the car where I made a traffic error, and I fully admit it was my fault. And I either was going to get T-boned or hit the car head-on, so I turned into the car and hit it head-on to reduce the nature of the impact because I didn't want to end up under the car. We all make mistakes, but when you're on a bike and somebody's out to hurt you, your outcome is not going to be good. You know,
you think in the one where you got arrested, you think if you had stayed put and not kept running, it would have ended differently?
Well, I think I needed to just jump up on the sidewalk and stop.
Right.
You know, and I think that's where sometimes, like I was saying, when we're in that moment, we don't want to have to stop any more than the driver does. Now, the traffic laws were on my side. The person should have come to a complete stop at the stop sign and waited for me. I had the right of way. That said, dying with the right of way,
right?
That's not what I want on my team.
That's always been my theory. It doesn't really pay to be right in those situations.
Right. And, you know, sometimes you just don't be aggressive, you know, let it go. So you got to
let it go. Resist the urge to slap somebody's hood because like you said, everybody's so amped up right now that it just, you don't know what's going on inside their head. You know?
Right. I look at it as if I have to touch a vehicle to move myself away from it, that's the point where I'm going to make contact, because otherwise it's, as soon as you touch that vehicle, now and people are very possessive. Yeah.
And I think the other thing you do is sort of look ahead and see these things coming, right? Be aware that they're coming, because, you know, I tend to get in those situations when I'm overtired and I stop paying attention to my environment. Especially on the bike, you know, but if you can see it coming, it's better just to stop and not engage at all. Right. So expect people to kill you. And I think because I grew up riding a motorcycle, I have that sort of burned into me. I'm always looking for that person turning into my blind side.
Well, and you have to be watching everybody else too, because I have yet another crazy story. One time I was biking through an intersection and somebody did something like crazy where I had to ride up onto a lawn to get out of the way of what they were doing. Somebody on the other side of the road out of a car yelled some type of obscenity at the woman that was driving the car, who, you know, basically she also drove up on the lawn. Like, I don't have anything to do with this, right? I was not the one that was verbally assaulted to the other person, and I ended up getting chased by the man in the car with the woman with a lead pipe. They went up the road and stopped, and he got out of the car and pulled out a lead pipe and came at me. I'm like, I am not the one. I'm not the one that yelled at you. You know, it's like, you're like an innocent bystander. I mean, it's just, and like you said, people are there's so much frustration in the world right now that, like, anything that you can do to avoid interacting with other people. And I do think about that now, and I choose my routes a little bit differently. I choose lower traffic routes whenever I can, just because, and it's harder when you're cycling because you're covering so much more distance. But, you know, why have the aggravation? If I can avoid motor vehicles, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I try to stay on the rail trails as much as possible now, especially, you know, even where I live, where they expect to see you. In some parts of our country, they really don't expect to see runners or cyclists, right? In the Boston area, they do expect to see runners at least, right? Because we're out all the time. But, you know, in some parts of the country, it's almost like you don't have those right of ways because you're not expected to be there. Like whenever I was down running in Atlanta, you got to be really careful in Atlanta. They don't expect to see you, and they're always running those red lights on those right turns.
I was going to say Alabama. When I was in Alabama, this is how much, you know, it's an inch over the white line. That's all there is. And you're out there running, and it's 100 degrees out. All right. And it's 110% humidity, and you're out there running, and they're like, what the hell is this fool doing?
Yeah. People pull over and go, hey, buddy, you need help?
Yeah. It's like you're running on the road at traffic, and they They don't expect that.
Like, and there's no shoulder either. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no shoulder. I can't even imagine what cycling there is like,
Yeah. And so I've been in marathons and actual in the race and had people clipped by the rearview mirrors on the trucks.
Yeah.
Going in the same direction as us, even though on a coned course, right? That mirror sticks out about 8 inches. And it smacks somebody off the shoulder right in front of me, right?
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing with racing too, where sometimes you'll get traffic, you'll get somebody who's super frustrated because the race is causing delays, and they're in their own world. They're not focused on all of these other people and what they're doing, and they can't. If it's not something they do, I think it's hard for people who don't run and don't cycle to understand how fragile you feel sometimes when you're out there. I'm obviously fairly aggressive, having been arrested while I was out running once. I try to own my space and be as big as I can and let people see me. And I don't cede my ground easily, but they're just not aware that, like, they think you're a nuisance. They think that you're trying to make things difficult for them. And it's like, it's the opposite. I just want to be alive when I get done every day,
Yeah, and that's you look at it's not the first car that typically is a problem. It's the second or third car because they don't see you, right?
Yeah,
because you, like you said, you get big and take up a little bit more room when you see the car coming at you, and then they'll give you a foot, but then that next one reacts in the opposite direction, right? They lean in, so you got to watch that second car.
Well, and you're always looking for people that are on their phone too. I mean, I can't tell you how often I see people go by me and their eyes are in their lap. And it's like, I know they can't see me. I'm hoping they're looking up periodically and that they already saw me. But, and then you have people, they're drinking, they're eating, they're doing other things in the car. It's like, I don't want to have to ride around in a self-driving car because I love to drive, but I think we're probably all better off.
Yeah, I can't see any way that the self-driving cars could drive worse than we do. So that's an easy one for me. Yeah, no kidding. All right, man. What else? What's the solution to all this? I think it's just pay attention. Everybody's got to own their own space, like you said. You got to own your own behavior.
Yeah, I mean, you'd love it to be education and everybody learns and understands what to look for out there. But you mentioned it earlier. Different environments are so different. Different types of roads, different amounts of side to the road. I think that, in a lot of countries, you see them really dedicating recreational space to cyclists and to runners. I think for cyclists, the way that they implement it here in the U.S. is terrible. Like, it is. Yeah, I'm a cyclist, but when I see cycling lanes in cities, I'm baffled at what the thinking is.
Yeah, it's setting you up to die. I've seen in Boston, there's no way. And people die on those, we get a couple a year that die in those cycling lanes.
Yeah, and it's because they encourage you to, at certain times, you have to drive in the cycling lane to get where you're going, right? It's just, you'd be better off in the same way that you have one-way streets, closing some streets off. It would be better for pedestrians and cyclists to have some streets that are just plain closed to motor vehicle traffic. Yeah. Because we don't seem to know how to implement safe urban pedestrian.
No, it's like a half measure, right? Yeah. And as a result, it's more dangerous than if you didn't have one at all, because it gives the cyclists sort of the impression that they're safe where they're not. You're sharing that lane with a bunch of Massachusetts drivers.
My experience with Boston drivers is they're relatively aggressive.
They are. There's just a different set of rules.
Yeah.
You got to know the rules.
I don't know. Like, I think that we have to protect ourselves as much as we can. And I think that we need to continue to advocate for spaces. I'd love to be able to ride on every road in the country, but it's just not feasible. So give me, if you're really that annoyed with me being in your travel space, give me a place to go. And it's got to be robust. It can't be, 8 miles of trail for a cyclist doesn't do it.
Well, not for every cyclist, right?
Right.
But that's changing too. They just put an extension in on one of my local trails that basically made it like 40 miles worth of trail from 6, right? So there was one highway we had to hop over, and they finished the bridge last week. So
you know, and I think for some cyclists, they need to look at, all right, well, maybe I should get a gravel bike, you know, so that I can, because trails, that kind of like what they give us to ride on a lot of times, it's a mix of different things, right? It's a little railroad track. It's a little path. There's some dirt. There's some, and you know, you're not taking your triathlon bike out and getting down in the aero bars and on these paths. You can still get great training in on a gravel bike, or I actually do most of my riding on the road on a mountain bike because I want to save my race bike for when I need it, you know?
Yeah. I'm training with my mountain bike right now. Just, you know, it's like half woods, half road to connect the trails. Because I feel like you get a better strength workout from that, you know?
Yeah. And you just have more flexibility as to where to go and what you want to do.
Yep. Yeah. You see a curb coming, just hop it. Yeah.
Plus, it throws away the urge to like go as fast as humanly possible all the time. When you're on that race bike, you really want to you want to go out and ride like 17 miles an hour on the race bike. Yeah. But on the mountain bike, I have an excuse. The thing weighs like, you know, 25 pounds. It's like, I'm not going to ride 30 kilometers an hour for 4 hours on this thing.
All right. So what are your top 3 lessons from years and years of Ironman training?
Be consistent, eat well, and sleep better than I do.
Yeah.
I always, because I'm actually an Ironman certified coach, and you know, the first rule that I say to anybody is like, do not use me as an example for anything that you do in your life, because I drink more beer than I probably should. I definitely don't sleep enough. I work out a lot, but you know, I guess more than 3 rules, the big rule is be happy. You know, if I'm not enjoying it, I would rather train in a way that I enjoy and get whatever result I get on race day than I'm not Tom Brady. The guy is like amazing, but I'm not going to eat the way he eats. I'm not going to sleep the way he sleeps. And I know that as an athlete, I would be a little bit more productive if I would put more time into some of those things.
Yeah.
But you know what? I enjoy my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Then suck all the joy out of your life.
Yeah. And he's enjoying his life too. I'm not saying he's not.
Well, he's got the supermodel too. So
yeah,
there's plus and minuses. All right, man. I'll let you go.
All right. I appreciate your time today.
Yep.
Take care.
Have a great weekend. Get your long ride in.
I will. It was fun talking to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.